Welcome back to the B Block, our second section of this week's Cannabis Coast to Coast news. I'm Alaina Pinto. This is when we go across the pond to Europe to see what is going on in those foreign lands. We start in Zurich, Switzerland, where that country continues to monitor their pilot program for medical patients it was supposed to end this month, but now it has been extended for 2 more years. Only 2,300 people have been selected so far, but that number is expected to grow to over 3,000 thanks to this extension. Country regulators want to expand distribution to include more women and occasional users. Researchers report that 90% of participants now purchase their cannabis from licensed pharmacies and specialty stores as opposed to the legacy market in that country. Now let's check in on the UK with Dave Barton.
I'm Dave Barton from Thermidor with your UK Cannabis Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. International patient advocacy group, We the Patients, has announced it will hold its first event in the UK during Medical Cannabis Month. The event, being held on the 7th November at the Charter House in the Barbican in London, is being organised in collaboration with UK patient advocacy group Patient Can, and will feature a roster of high-profile speakers, as well as patients sharing their own stories. Attendees can expect insights on cannabis-based chronic pain treatments, as well as shared learning and practical workshops. The event is the latest in a series of European events organised by We the Patients. Another was held in Switzerland last month, reflecting its mission to reshape the conversation around medical cannabis through patient-led advocacy. That's all for this week's UK report. I'm Dave Barton from Thermidor, reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
This is Debi Facey with the Cannabis Coast to Coast News Report. What we have in Canada this week is Manitoba reaching $170 million when it came to generating a revenue profit, which meant that in a wholesale, they reached $47.3 million, which is absolutely amazing for Manitoba. What we also have is in PEI, they are expressing interest when it comes to selling vape products in their stores, which is going to be amazing for PEI due to the fact that they are losing out on some great products and sales out there. When it comes to Canada, this is the Canadian Coast to Coast News Report. Debi Facey, have a great one. Peace.
Turning our attention back to this country, the number one state in revenue is California, but while the Golden State is one of the oldest pro-cannabis states in the country, there is still plenty of problems. One alone is that a recent poll of regular cannabis consumers in California are not aware that if you are transporting cannabis in your car, it must be in a sealed container and unopened. According to a recent survey, only 59% of regular cannabis consumers were familiar with that law in their state. In the meantime, there's been plenty of busts in California as law enforcement is cracking down on illegal operations. Dina Nagib has more from her state of California.
I'm Dina Nagib, Principal Consultant at Grass Goddess Consulting, here to give you the latest developments in California for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. Last week, Governor Newsom's office announced the results of a 3-month crackdown on illegal cannabis operations around the state. In total, more than 66 tons of cannabis plants valued at more than $200 million were seized. In addition, toxic pesticides were found at illegal grow sites and other crimes were discovered, emphasizing the importance of the legal regulated market. In other news, a new study came out from my alma mater, the University of California, San Diego, which found links between cannabis use and specific parts of the human genome. The study was done in collaboration with genetic testing company 23andMe and had the goal of finding markers that could predict which people are more likely to develop cannabis use disorder. What they found is that there are 2 genes, one which is also linked to impulsive personality disorder, obesity, and cancer metastasis, and another linked to psychiatric disorders, including schizophrenia and bipolar disorder, which were associated with lifetime cannabis use. The study also found that there are more than 100 different traits and almost 50 genes that are associated with lifetime and more frequent cannabis use. demonstrating the complexity of the topic and the need for further studies. That's it for California News this week. I'm Dina Nagib from Grass Goddess Consulting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
Now let's take a look at New York. The Empire State continues to work its way through communication issues with the Office of Cannabis Management, and now a licensing scheme has been discovered by those regulators. Omnium Health is in big trouble with the OCM in New York after evidence exposed that the Long Island-based distributor and manufacturer allowed their license to be rented by non-licensed manufacturers and grows. The Office of Cannabis Management is coming down hard on this company that is now facing millions of dollars in fines. There's a total recall of all of their products in the state that are being sold in dispensaries. And on top of that, the company could lose that license that they had been renting out. This company has been under investigation by the Trade Practices Bureau, an enforcement division under the OCM that was formed earlier this year. That group is charged with keeping the licensed, regulated, and legal industry above board, according to their executive director, James Rogers, who said, quote, "This kind of cheating robs compliant businesses of their right to compete in a fair market. If we work together, we can keep New York's cannabis market above board," unquote. Well, now let's check in on Virginia with Joe Parsons.
I'm Joe Parsons with the Virginia Cannabis Connection from Higher Education's Coffee Talk, sponsored by 97.5 3WB and reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. After the success of last year's event, the Virginia Veterans Canna Competition is back for an even bigger and better event planned for this year. The second annual Virginia Veterans Canna Competition is a unique event organized by veterans. It will have educational classes, cannabis grow classes, vendors, live entertainment, and giveaways. This event aims to create a supportive and impactful experience. Tickets for the Saturday event on November 1st are only $25, with camping options and upgrades available. The event will be held at the Second 40 to 420 Farm in Pamplin, Virginia. And since it's Halloween weekend, it should be a pretty spooky good time. Brian Natsky, the founder of Virginia Veterans Canna Competition, is a Navy veteran who struggles with PSD, led him to discover the healing power of cannabis for himself. His hope is that one day the stigma that surrounds the community, especially with veterans, and the plant medicine will be a thing of the past. Until then, he vows to educate as many people on the healing power of cannabis as possible. Finally, with Halloween weekend approaching, I have a suggestion for a creepy, spooky classic to terrify you. The 1936 thriller Reefer Madness, with creepy prohibitionists and enough stigma-inducing terror to give you nightmares for decades. Trust me, I know. Terrifying. I wouldn't recommend watching this alone. Well, that's going to do it for this week from Higher Education's Coffee Talk, sponsored by 97.5 3WB in Charlottesville, and reporting for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. I'm Joe Parsons. Until next time, happy Halloween and stay lifted.
Another sign that President Trump is ready to move forward with some kind of cannabis reform happened this week when he named a dispensary operator in Michigan the envoy to Iraq. Mark Sevilla is the owner of Leaf and Bud, where 3 dispensaries operating in Detroit, Centerline, and Hazel Park. Sevilla was instrumental in helping the president win in Michigan in the last election, and now is taking on a role as envoy that is very new to the entrepreneur, and he is very well known in Michigan as a pro-cannabis supporter since it is his image that was used on billboards advertising for the plant medicine in Michigan. And with more on that, here's Amie Carter with the Michigan Report, now sponsored by Wally's Wonder World of handmade, customizable humidors.
This is mold on wheat. This is mold on weed. And this is what this Wonder World plant is supposed to look like. Do you want to make sure this never happens to your precious flower? Check out the handmade humidors by Fenton, Michigan craftsman Gregory Johnson. Each humidor can hold 1 ounce of your stash, and it comes with a Boveda humidity pack. You care about your flower, so protect it inside a humidor made with American-grown maple, cherry, or sapele wood. Check out their website at wallyswonderworld.com. There you'll find the famous award-winning Hakuna Matata No Worries Humidor. You'll also find a variety of humidors with different designs. They even customize accessories like doobie tubes, grinders, and even a classic roach clip from the 70s. Treat your stash with class with a custom-made, handmade humidor from wallyswonderworld.com and never worry about moldy weed again.
I'm Amie Carter from Michigan Weedsters, bringing you this week's Michigan Report for Cannabis Coast to Coast News. The top news impacting the industry includes Detroit dispensary owner Mark Zamaya from Leaf and Bud, who was appointed by President Trump as the new special envoy to Iraq. The appointment drew criticism over his cannabis background and limited diplomatic experience. A new Michigan State University study found that about 1 in 6 pregnant women in Michigan use cannabis, with higher rates in some areas. Researchers still caution that use during pregnancy and breastfeeding could be a danger to the infant's health. In the courts, a Menominee County judge denied Puff Cannabis' request to force the city to approve its dispensary, leaving plans in limbo ahead of a voter ordinance. Also, former Skymint CEO Jeff Radaway is being sued by his ex-wife Susan, who alleges a backdoor weed scheme to acquire assets and launch a new business, Fantasy Farms, before diverting funds out of state. Radaway denies the claims. Separately, Michigan State Police seized cannabis plants during a raid in Cortland Township as part of an ongoing investigation. Finally, what critics are calling a legislative assault on Michigan's recreational law, the MRTMA, is causing significant worry. This includes the new 24% wholesale tax on cannabis transfers that was recently passed. Numerous bills have also been introduced, such as Senate Bill 597 and House Bills 5104 to 5107, which would impose strict license caps and recriminalize low-level activity. Critics view these actions as a retreat from legalization and are urging lawmakers to let the CRA stabilize the market instead. It's definitely a time to unite. Please follow the Michigan Weedsters at michiganweedsters.com or on social media to stay informed and get involved. I'm Amie Carter from Cannabis Coast to Coast News.
The Michigan Report is sponsored by wallyswonderworld.com.
That will do it for the B block or second section of news this week. We've got one more section to go with stories from Illinois, Washington State, Minnesota, and Nevada. Cannabis Coast to Coast news continues after this.
Hi, I'm Jimmy Young, and it's time for school. That's school with a K. I love the name of this platform because it's the first course I'll be teaching where spelling really doesn't count. It's how words sound, how you pronounce them, and how clear your speech is. Do you have the mumbles? Do you have the dreaded itis, gap fillers? The course is called Teaching Generation Text to Talk. I've done this for decades as a professional broadcaster on TV. I've even won an Emmy Award as a sports talk show host for a kids show I co-created in the 1990s for the TV channel that I worked for in Boston. I've mentored hundreds of young people on their journey in the broadcast community, and I'm sure some of them will join me to share what they are doing now. And the whole idea of this is to get people to listen when you talk and to get them to understand you. I use the decades of experience I have in broadcasting to share the tools and exercises that will improve your oral communication skills, even the nonverbal ones. You know, many speech experts believe that 90% of communication is nonverbal. Do you make eye contact? Do you talk with your hands, like I do? Is your handshake firm or wimpy? All these skills will help you build your confidence by putting the phone down and actually talking to people. Do you have a personal elevator pitch? Who are you? Where are you from? What do you do for a living? What distinguishes you or differentiates you from others who might be applying for the same job? I've got 10 one-hour lessons that I'll be offering to individuals or in groups of 5. I call the workshops EPIC. That's E for enunciation, P for pronunciation, I for inflection, and C for cadence. I'll also be offering a free 1 hour, once a week call-in show where you could just join me to ask any questions you want. I've got a background in sports, so I love to talk about that, but I've also built a network for one of the most controversial industries in modern society. That's right, it's the cannabis industry. I'm the executive producer of the nation's only TV news-style show called Cannabis Coast to Coast News with the very talented Alaina Pinto. Now, it's all about learning how to talk, to speak, to communicate like a broadcaster. It's epic! So join my community that I'm calling the Forever Young School of Communication. Sign up for the first course, Teaching Generation Text to Talk. And for now and forever, I'm Jimmy Young, and I look forward to talking to you.